And the joy of identifying it, you feel successful now rather than some mythical time in the future. Someone who listens to this, dearly, I promise you, if they took on board what I said, their lives would change.
Okay, we're recording.
Well, Delia, it's lovely to be with you today. Let me give you a little brief overview for your listeners about Charles Kovess, so that you don't have to read slavishly a bio, and like many people, we all love talking about ourselves. So my brand currently is Australasia's passion provocateur, and I've had a life of law, being a tax lawyer for 20 years, and for 29 years I've been a professional speaker, executive coach and businessman. So in sum total, I've had 49 years of business experience, but my real business experience started when I was 12, when I was a commissioned debt collector. I've written 2 books and co-authored another 2 books. I've got 2 more books that are 3/4 done, and I have a number of business interests that we can unpack. I have 5 children, I have 3 grandchildren, I have 5 brothers and sisters. I was born on the 14th, 1/4, which is the 5. So for all of your listeners who are keen on numerology, 5 is my number. And the relevance of 5 is that the key element of 5 in numerology, between 1 and 9, is that 5s are all about freedom. And my life really, in summary, is about fighting for freedom. And I got into law, and I was passionate about law because I knew that law is a crucial tool or a crucial weapon in preserving freedom. So here I am, and you know, my game plan is to be around for many years to come.
Great. So can we go back and start with how you grew up?
We can. I grew up in Melbourne, born in the year of the dragon, which was 1952. So I've just turned 70, and my parents were refugees from Hungary. That's plays a crucial part in my life. So they arrived here in 1949, and my mum is still alive. She's 90. I was the second of 6 children, and having 6 children as refugees in Melbourne, it meant that I was on Struggle Street. So like some of your other guests in the past, at the age of 10, I started delivering newspapers. And for 7 years I was a paper boy. And at the age of 12, I became a commissioned debt collector for that newsagent. Most Hungarians are Catholic in the country now, and then when my parents arrived, they came to Australia to get away from communism and totalitarianism. And that whole theme of freedom has played a big part in my life. So I went to Catholic schools in Melbourne, went to Melbourne University, I got an honours degree in law, master's degree in law, and then I practiced law for 20 years, speaking for 29 years, and here I am, a short way along my journey. My game plan, Delia, is to do at least another 50 years of work. That's my game plan. So the word retirement does not figure, has never figured in my thinking. I have no desire to retire, and as a passion provocateur, I now spend my life provoking people to discover and pursue their passion. So from an early age, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Now, how did I know I wanted to be a lawyer? Because my parents' friends said I should be a lawyer. Now, why did they say that? Because I could always argue my way out of trouble. Give you one example of that. When my mother would tell me how bad I was, and I could be a little ratbag, so the second of 6 children, and mum, you know, had to work, like it was a classic refugee story. She worked full time at Tom Piper, which ironically is the company that John Elliott, in his journey to fame, took over, a canning company. So she ran the canteen, and 100 women who were all packing food. Anyway, mum had 6 kids, and when she told me, "You are such a bad boy," I would make her cry. I'd be so bad. I would tell her, "Mum, the reason why I'm bad is because you brought me up badly." So, Mum, it's your fault that I'm bad. And so that was the comment that I had from an early age, you should be a lawyer. And so I knew what I wanted to do. So all the way through school, I knew what I wanted to do. And then I got a scholarship when I finished school, which you needed to do in those days, in 1969 when I finished school, and then went to Melbourne Uni. And the rest is the journey that I've been on.
So did they talk to you when you were growing up about why they had to leave Hungary?
Very much. I was inculcated into the Hungarian community. My parents were the managers of the Hungarian home that was set up by Archbishop Daniel Mannix. And so Archbishop Mannix in Melbourne, that is a fascinating story, where he became the Archbishop, I think, in about 1917, and he died in about 1963. So he was the Archbishop for, just imagine that, from 1917 to 63 is 46 years he was the Archbishop. Was brought out from Ireland, was a feisty, a difficult character, and he gave a property in Elgin Avenue, Armidale, that was owned by the church, to the Hungarian community to be a home for young Hungarians leaving Hungary from the uprising in October 1956. And this whole story, so I was raised on this whole question of the 56 uprising. And I don't know whether you've heard about it, but that was when, so my parents, after the war, they met in a refugee camp in Austria because my dad and my mum, my dad was 9 years older than my mum, they both left Hungary to get away from communism. And so when World War II ended, the Russians, Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill did a deal, and US and Russia were on the same side. Well, the Russians coming through to push back against Nazi Germany, they occupied Hungary, and Hungary was becoming a dangerous place to be, where the communists were taking over. And so my parents left Hungary separately, and in 56, when the people rose up against communism, and bear in mind that in 1948 the elections the allegedly free elections that communism won in 1948 in Hungary were cooked by the Russians. So Russia took the politicians controlled by Russia took control of Hungary, and then 8 years later in 56, the time of the Melbourne Olympics, and here we are having this conversation in Melbourne overlooking the Melbourne Cricket Ground, which was the home of the Olympics. And on the 23rd of October 1956, there was a spontaneous student-led uprising. Not a revolution, because the argument was a revolution would be a revolution against a legitimate government. But the Hungarian nation never considered its government to be legitimate. They rose up against it. And just a point of interest, on the 23rd of October, when this started, that was my mother's birthday. That was her 24th birthday. She was born in 1932, so when she was 24, she already had 4 children living here, arrived here not able to speak English, as my father didn't know how to speak English. And so this uprising happens. Then on the 4th of November, the Russian tanks come into Hungary, squash this. 2 weeks later, the Melbourne Olympics starts here. The Hungarian team is already here. They don't know whether to come or go. And Archbishop Mannix gives this property early in 1957 to the Hungarian community because there were so many young single Hungarian men leaving the country to get away from communism. They came to Melbourne, and my parents were managers of that facility. Well, they were asked to be managers of that facility. And I grew up, so when I was 8 years of age in 1960, I was surrounded by guys, 21, 22, 23, who'd left their families, who were solo, living in this facility. I knew all about this, Delia. I knew what they had missed. They didn't want to leave their country. This is the equivalent for you and me having to leave Melbourne and go to China and can't speak English, or go to a country where we have to learn a whole new language, start with nothing. My parents came with a suitcase, and it was entirely unjust, unfair, criminal, corrupt, and so I grew up that way.
And did your dad talk to you about why he left?
Absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, there was no hidden story about that. They just said, my mum's family. So Mum, when she arrived in the refugee camp in 1947, she was only 15. And so when the war started and she was in the heart of Europe, she was 7 years of age. So for 8 years, for more than half of her life, she had been in a war and then in a refugee camp. So I knew precisely my dad was a similar journey. And they go, no, we want to be free. They were given the option of going to Canada or Australia, and they chose Australia. And then on the ship when they were coming out here, they were freedom. They were freedom fighters. And this whole, my life has been around, as I said, the number 5 about freedom. And I've made this proposition that freedom is what makes you and me human. Without freedom, I thought long and hard about this, we're not much different to animals. When we say I want to be free as a bird, no, birds they can fly places, but they're bound by instinct. If we don't have freedom, we're not much different to animals. And the tragedy, and this is why my work revolves around it, I see the tragedy that most people in Australia would give away freedom for the illusion of security. And I would never do that. And my thinking around this, of course, is informed by my parents' journey and the fact that if you look at a map of Europe, and I've got a time-lapse map, and I urge you to have a look at it as well. You look at the heart of Europe. England hasn't changed much, of course, over the 1,000 years, but you take a 1,000-year time-lapse of the borders of Europe, how incredibly changeable they are. Hungary in the middle is the oldest nation in Europe, founded in 896 AD. These days, in political correct terms, CE, standing for Common Era, because you're not allowed to say Anno Domino because that's the year of the Lord, and don't you dare have anything spiritual or Christian. I say AD, 896 AD. So Hungary is the oldest continuing nation in Europe. How about that? And for all of its existence, for 104 plus, anyway, 896 to now, it has fought for its freedom, for its independence, and it's really been a footpath through Europe. And it's been it's almost like genetically implanted in me. It's cellular memory of, if you don't fight for freedom, you will lose it. And all my life I have fought for that. I've fought to be free, and the stories that my parents told me, and these young guys, and how at the age of 17, 18, they were standing on Russian tanks throwing Molotov cocktails in them, and a number of their friends got shot during that 56 uprising, and I'm still dealing with these people today. I still see them.
So those values were really strong in the community.
Huge. And Christian values, particularly Catholic, but as I say, almost all of Hungary is Catholic. There's a small minority of Lutheran, but certainly Christian, and small Jewish, small others, but 95% Catholic Christian. And so I also consider that Christian principles governed Australia's constitution, governed the founding of Australia, and indeed governed the whole history of England since the 13th century, particularly since 1215 with the first Magna Carta. Christian principles. What are those principles? They relate to God's laws, to natural law, that you and me as a human being, we have inalienable rights. And one of those rights is your right to life. And so all of that thinking, that fight for freedom, it's so crucial to our humanity. And right now in Australia, what is the strongest sanction that a government can put on us right now? The answer is imprisonment. They can fine you and give them money. The thing that government's greatest threat to force people to behave is imprisonment, correct? What else is harder than that? Nothing. You go to jail if you commit a bad enough crime. Jail is about losing your freedom. And then what my work now is about is reminding people, informed by that 1,000 years of history and the inheritance that I have from my ancestors, of the importance of fighting for freedom. So there you are. That's why I've been a troublemaker all my life. I don't follow rules. I don't like being told what to do. Sorry, I follow appropriate rules, but if I consider a rule to be stupid, I will never follow it.
And so what I read in here about your parents saying you could never, as a migrant and whatever, you were never going to be able to become a lawyer.
That's right. They grew up in Melbourne with the view that essentially only WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, could be lawyers. And that was the information that they had. And so whilst I wanted to be a lawyer, the practicalities of that I hadn't thought through. All I knew is what I wanted to do. And then delivering newspapers. Now, I urge everybody to deliver newspapers, Delia. I think working from an early age is a good thing. And I think one of the benefits of that is that the willingness to work for what we want. So from the age of 10, it's almost child slavery, isn't it? Because my parents didn't have money to give to me. I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the dark of winter to get onto my bike, to ride a bike to the newsagent to deliver newspapers from 10. I did that till I was 17, towards the end of year 12 at school. And what happened, at the age of 12, I became a commission debt collector, and what that meant was, it's a bit of a fun way of describing what I did, but I got paid a commission for knocking on the doors of the newsagent's customers so that they could pay their monthly bill. And so every Saturday morning I had four rounds, so I'd collect the monthly account for each person. Now, one of those people I talk about in my book, Passionate People Produce, was Stuart Purnell, who was a lawyer. And from the age of 12, he would talk to me for so long, I left him to the last person, because he would talk to me for 1 or 2 or 3 hours, almost like a mentor. He had no children, and he was the guy who then enabled me to believe that I could be a lawyer. And indeed, he, with his mentorship, with his guidance, crucial element to helping people grow up. We all need mentors. I had no doubt that I could be a lawyer if my marks were good enough. Now, in the late 60s, you had to have a lot of money to go to university, unless you won a scholarship. So I had to study hard, and I went to Marsland, excellent school, Maris Brothers, and Stuart Purnell for 5 years. I would be seeing him once every 4 weeks, and then in 1968, get this, he invited me to play in his jazz band. So I taught myself to play the guitar, and I started playing in his jazz band as well. And we would have debates about Shakespeare, about Latin, about the law, about jazz. So, for example, what is jazz? Try and define jazz music. And so that was a wonderful benefit of being in the game of business, of working, of being willing to work every Saturday morning from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock on Saturday mornings to do this, collect, to earn some more money, because my parents couldn't give me any.
And what would you do with the money?
That's excellent. I had to buy clothes. because literally my mum and dad, I was the second of 6 children, and my mum and dad lived hand to mouth, and I reckon one of my I've analysed this. I've done a lot of personal development, a crucial element that I recommend to everybody listening to this. You must do personal development. Many lawyers I know have never done any personal development, and a lot of people think they've done personal development when they've read a book about personal development. And my metaphor for that is to say that you've done personal development because you've read a book is like saying you have learnt to ride a bike because you read the manual on how to ride a bike, or even more difficult, you read the manual on how to fly a helicopter, but you've never flown one. Quite a different experience. Personal development is a deep, challenging journey that many people avoid. Women are much more willing to do it than men. But I remember, I reckon 1965 when I was 13, maybe 66, coming out, being woken at night, my mum crying, with over the kitchen table with all these bills, 6 kids, no money, and so what I did with my money was to make me independent, so I wasn't a burden to my parents. They didn't ask me for money, but it meant that I didn't have to ask them for money. Now so that was enough to live on, so that I could do stuff. If I wanted a new bike, I could buy a bike. If I wanted to, one of my big thrills for Christmas was to buy myself one of those electric car racing things, Scalectrics, I think it was an English model. I could buy myself the stuff that I wanted. My parents couldn't afford to do it. So that gave me independence again, freedom again, so I could, if I wanted to do something, I had the money to go and do it.
And you felt good about it rather than looking at other kids and feeling like, oh, they get stuff that I can't.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's a good point. I never felt ripped off that I had to do this. I go, no, this is the life that I have. And I never once, I somehow knew that if this was given to me, it wouldn't mean as much as me earning it. And I knew, and I had my parents' friends, they're Hungarian, they're mainly mixed in Hungarian circles, although my dad became an insurance agent in the late 60s, early 70s, very successfully. When I say very successfully, able to keep his head above water, but my dad was never interested in making money. Money was just a means to living life.
What was he interested in?
He was interested in learning. And he posed very much, I talk about this in the book as well, at an early age he would be having philosophical discussions with me. I don't know how, just one-on-one. He wouldn't do it so much as a family gathering, but he said, understand your scale of values. Understand your values. And even now, dear, I teach people in my work as a professional speaker and educator, I teach people to identify their values, to understand why you make decisions. And here I am, my dad, teaching me that when I was 10, 11, 12, because each one of us is a trade-off. Just like you sitting here, hosting a podcast, getting a podcast out here, you are trading your time for a particular reason. And so values, and then the Catholic, the Catholic Christian structure of life is also values based. For example, what is the value of a human being? What is the value of a person? And in many societies on the planet, individuals don't matter, it's just society that matters. And I say that Western civilization is built on the Christian principle that every one of us matters. We are of value regardless of the economic value of the person, that we matter as a human being. And then each human being has to make this decision. So, what do I value? Well, I ask people what their values are. They have no idea. And so they're making decisions unconsciously. And that right now in society, we now live in a world, particularly with young people, that go, well, I feel like doing something. And there's no conscious intent, no real philosophical underpinning for the decisions that we make. Well, I had the gift of both Stuart Purnell, my dad, and my third big mentor was a Jesuit priest who was based in Xavier College in Melbourne. He was a part-time teacher there. He was a Hungarian Jesuit priest and an incredibly wise man. So I had these, like, what a gift that is. And I still teach stuff that I learnt from Father Varga, Father Zoltan Varga, Stuart Purnell and my dad. How amazing, don't you think?
But it's the awareness. See, a lot of people might have these mentors, but they don't have the mindset. Like, you are choosing to be grateful. You could sit here and say, my life was so hard and I didn't have anything and my parents couldn't afford anything and I'm a victim. But you're choosing to look at the people who helped you and the positives.
Yes, and that's taking the word victim. Take that word victim. We live in a victim-blame society. We live in a society right now in Australia, and I've been saying this for many years, where people say, poor me, poor me. I've been ripped off, I had a hard life, blah, blah, blah. Well, for some reason, and I think this is the Hungarian, but perhaps it's the mentors that I had, I was always willing to take personal responsibility. Because the choice in life is a stark black and white choice. We either take responsibility or we play the victim and we blame others. And so my dad took responsibility for his life. Here I had that example. Even before I was born, they took responsibility for their lives by leaving the country they didn't want to leave. Why? Because their values were that freedom was more important than being comfortable. Make sense? And so this choice, responsibility versus playing victim, and psychologically, if you look at why people are unhappy and often depressed, it's because they don't want to take responsibility. Now, I take the point, there is some tiny proportion of the population psychologically unable to take responsibility, like my nephew who's got intellectual disability. I exempt those people, and then I exempt people who are so damaged, small proportion. But I challenge everybody listening to this to look at their willingness to take responsibility. And the reward for taking responsibility is you're in control. Because responsibility is a nice play on words there, is your ability to respond to circumstance. What is your response ability? And if you accept that life has little meaning except the meaning we put to it, which I believe, so right, well, what does that mean that person yelled at me, that stole from me, that treated me badly? What does that mean? Well, my response to that internally is a function of my philosophy. And if I'm upset by something that you say to me, Delia, I create that upset. You cannot upset me. And I learned that at a very early age, and so my responsibility is, that's an interesting thought. You think I'm hopeless, I'm stupid, I'm incompetent, incapable. And one of the principles that I've learnt on the journey is this wonderful mantra that is, what other people think of me is none of my business. What other people think of me is none of my business. What counts is what I think of me. Now, here's the complexity around this. A lot of people delude themselves by saying, I'm a fantastic human being. How come not everybody loves me? Well, there's this delusional aspect. But coming back to responsibility, I learnt at an early age that when I take responsibility for my life, I'm in control. The world is not in control. And I love being in control of my life.
Okay, so what is your advice then for people who really do struggle with that, worrying about what people think of them?
Well,
Like me.
the starting point is to precisely ask, what do you think of yourself? And most people can't answer that question. I've coached senior executives in major corporations in this country and around I've spoken in 8 countries around the world, and I've had coaching clients from around the world. You see, if you don't know who you are, then you're sitting there listening to opinions from everybody else about who you are. And so my starting point is to challenge, is to explore, is to help my clients explore what they genuinely believe about themselves. And Delia, you would be amazed at high-level people when they're honest, which doesn't happen often. And my challenge as a coach is getting people to speak up about what's really going on inside them. You would not believe how many of them deeply, deeply consider themselves incompetent. And so they live their lives in terror of being found out that truly how incompetent they are. And one of the principles that I share with everybody, and I'm happy to share here, which is so liberating, is that any one person on the planet only knows a tiny proportion of what there is to know. And once we let go of this idea that we're supposed to know everything, then life becomes a joy. Then you go, here is me. Here is Charles Kovess. This is who I am. Here's Delia Burgess. This is who I am. If you can't answer the question, who are you? Then you are like flotsam and jetsam on the ocean of life. But when you know who you are, you're like a powerful steamship going through the waves on your journey to what you want to create. I'm on my journey for what I want to create. And so the words that I recommend, the 2 words is to craft your own identity, your own strong identity. I say this to most people. Answer that question. And I have found that each one of us has got such amazing capabilities. We've got such beautiful qualities. But we get fixated on what we don't know and what we're not good at. Every person has got beautiful qualities and wonderful capabilities and competencies, and far more things that they can't do. And so when you let go of the idea of needing to know everything, then you can feel strong inside you, and then you can have integrity. And this building that we're in now on the 20th floor, this building has integrity. Why does it have integrity? Because it stands up and puts up with all of the storms and the likes of life. When you have integrity, when I have integrity, when I know who I am and I act accordingly to it, I am very powerful. I can live my life on my terms.
And I guess going back to how you think of yourself, so if you are not behaving as you really want to, say you're not, you don't feel good about yourself, for example, okay? You're drinking too much, or you're indulging in things that don't make you feel good. I guess deep down you think, well, yeah, I am lazy, I am whatever, I do lack discipline. So then is it to change your behavior and say, okay, I'm getting up and I'm going for a walk or whatever, and then teaching yourself or changing the way you view yourself, because then you no longer view yourself as lazy.
Well, there are 2 ways. You can either do it on your own or you can get some help. Now, who you get help from is crucial. I know psychologists who love having clients for 10 years. And the patients are trapped with them for 10 years. It becomes a codependent relationship. The psychologist is dependent on the patient for the psychologist's own validation and income. I'm interested in finding the tip of the spear, and it's a beautiful concept that my awareness of it really is the Spartan way of thinking, that that if you find the tip of the spear, the leverage point to get us to change behaviour, then we can change behaviour quickly. But if we're in the mud, in quicksand, and we're just not clear how to do it, then in my experience, most people don't take the steps because they don't even know where to start. And so, first of all, there's that choice. Am I going to work this out myself or get help? Now, as a coach, I'm happy to say that over the years, and as a lawyer, Delia, I think this is one of the benefits of being a lawyer. What a lawyer's job is to, from a morass of information, to dig out what's relevant. And so when I deal with a human, when I deal with a man or a woman, I know there's no other person on the planet like that person. There's no other person on the planet like you. Isn't that amazing? You're one of 8 billion. And nobody on earth has had your life of these 8 billion people, because your experiences with the parents that you had, with the siblings that you had, the ups and the downs, nobody has had that identical experience as you. And so that then drives your thinking process. And so in the interaction that I have with individuals, I'm looking for that tip of the spear. And I have found if I can find that tip of the spear, one insight, just one click, and NLP does a little bit of that work, but one insight can change a person's life dramatically. And how do I know that? Because I had numerous people who've said to me, you changed my life. Now, I didn't change their life. I shared an idea that resonated with them at that moment in time. And that's often all that it needs. Give you an example. Golf. Do you play golf? What sport do you know well?
Tennis.
Tennis? Good. Are you any good? I'm a good tennis player. We'll have a game of tennis, okay? We'll see how good you are. Anyway, I've played a lot of tennis over the years. I'm a pretty good player, and I just happen, through joy and experience, happen to know Novak Djokovic through various circumstances. Tennis is a great example, just like golf. What's the difference between the number 20th tennis player in the world and number 1? And you have a look at the way they play tennis, it's enormously difficult to find that distinction. Or number 100 tennis player, because I think the rankings in tennis go out to number 5 or 6,000. Number 100th best tennis player and Novak Djokovic on the men's side. On the women's, it's a little bit less clear or Rafa. And you go, what is it that they're doing differently? And what can I change now as a tennis player to become better? That's how I look at this work that I do in people's lives. Now, there's another important principle from this. Do you think Rafa Nadal and Novak Djokovic's lives are easier or more difficult than the 50th tennis player in the world?
Depends how you measure it.
That's correct. Number 1. Number 2, the pressure on Rafa and Novak and Ash Barty till she retired, the pressure when you get to the top is enormous. And one of the principles that I also find, one of the most liberating principles I share with anybody, is principles around problems. So, do you have any problems? Do people have problems? Of course they do. Your mum and dad have problems, siblings, everyone has problems. Would you agree? Do you know anyone who doesn't have problems? I don't. I have problems. Now, why? We have problems and we want to solve them. Why do we want to solve them? We think that solving our problems is going to make life better for ourselves. And it does, doesn't it? Have a problem, you solve it, you're short of money, you get some money. Like I had a problem. I'd started delivering newspapers, I solved that problem. Here's my proposition that I learnt from Buckminster Fuller. I talk about him a lot in my book. I'm a fan of Fuller, who died in 1983. He was awarded 47 honorary doctorates. Most people in my experience have never heard of Buckminster Fuller. He said this, and this is the life-changing idea. As human beings, our major reward for solving our problems is bigger problems. When we embrace that idea, guess what happens? We stop saying, I'll be happy when. Because in my experience, and I've had lots of intimate discussions with a lot of human beings, Delia, and with teams and individuals, most people, think about this, why are most people unhappy? Because they've got problems. Well, everyone that I know has problems. You've agreed with me earlier, everyone's got problems. Is it possible to be happy and have problems? Of course it is, because you know people that are happy who have problems. The illusion of most people is that they can't be happy with problems. And I'm saying your reward and my reward as human beings is bigger problems. As we go on the journey of life, when you finish year 11 at school, you're in year 12. You then start university, you're at the bottom. You go through year 1, 2, 3 and 4. You then graduate. When you finish university, got an honours degree in law like me, are your problems over? No. Then you become an article clerk in a law firm and you're absolutely a piece of shit. You're a nobody. Then you become a partner. Then you have kids, then you get married, then you get divorced. The key to life is to let go of the illusion that the good life is the life without problems. And in my experience, people say, I'll be happy when I solve this problem. That's a stupid, silly, ignorant way to live life.
Yeah, you have to be happy in the present. And I guess happiness only exists in the present.
Yeah.
And then it's about choosing the problems you want to have.
Beautifully put. And so we come back to values.
I took that from Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That's kind of his argument. So it's like, if you want to have a body like something, fine, go and do that. But then you have the problem of you have to get up and work out.
Or if you want the problem of becoming the number one tennis player in the world. I never wanted to be the number one tennis player in the world or the number one golfer in the world. I don't want to be number one at anything.
Yeah. So that's about choosing the game you want to play, and I think that's when people get stuck. Because if you get to the first step of saying, okay, this person has all this wealth, whatever, Bill Gates or something, but it's like, really, do you want his life, like how he's lived and all his personal
And do you want to be a goldfish in a bowl where the world is looking at everything you do? Would you like that? I wouldn't.
So then you say, okay, what game do I want to play? And I think that's when people get stuck. And that's when, or maybe people have ideas about what they would really like to do, but then there's a lot of fear about how will the world
So let's
accept.
unpack that. No, they say, this is what I want to do. It's not so much fear, but belief. Okay, so the problem is that we go, I don't believe in my soul, in my heart, that I'm capable of getting what I want. And so we never try. And part of that also is this question of what is success. You see, if I want to become the number one player in the world and I don't get there, can I say that I'm successful? And so this belief issue, so one of the questions around identity is to identify what it is that we believe about ourselves. And I urge everybody to start with the belief that I am a wonderful human being capable of so much more. That's the starting point. And then the next one is, I believe I know lots of useful stuff, but I only know a tiny proportion of what there is to know. Third, I believe I'm capable of getting better. Just take on that idea. I believe I'm capable of getting better. Good. And then you say, so what do I really want? And that's, as a passion provocateur, I help people get clear on what it is that they really want. So if you could have anything that you want, what do you want? And are you willing to pay the price? So number one in the world, earn $50 million a year like Novak. Are you willing to pay the price of 8 hours a day of tennis? I never wanted to pay that price. Now, it then leads to this question of feeling successful. And I would say I'm a success coach. I'm a professional speaker. I deal with leadership. I deal with success as a human being. And I want to share with you my favourite definition of success. I don't think it's in my book because I learnt this subsequent to my book, my first book and my second book. And this definition was quoted by Earl Nightingale in a wonderful recorded presentation that became the first platinum the first record of the spoken word to go platinum. And here's the definition. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Success, the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, not the attainment of a worthy ideal. So right now, Delia, if I showed you my list of goals, they're huge, and I've had goals in my journey. I am constantly developing those goals. Life is like climbing a series of mountains. If you go, I'll only be happy when I achieve my goal, you climb to the top of the mountain, you get there, then what do you have to do? You come back down again into depression. You go up, excitement, down, depression, now I've got to start again. The worthy ideal, we touched on it earlier, that my father taught me about, is what is the meaning of our lives? What is the meaning of your life? Any person, I say to them in many of my speeches, I say, why are we on the planet? That's the worthy ideal. And my dad's worthy ideal was, he said, I'm here as a human being. We are here. Our purpose is to learn and grow. I've adopted that for me. And in my second book, Passionate Performance, I talk about that. I have my purpose statement. My purpose, I can recite it for you now. I won't, but it starts like this. My purpose in life is to be an educator, coach and mentor of the power of passion in our lives so that people can understand what the benefits that a passionate life can give. Through my international business, I'm learning and growing in awareness and consciousness and love over the world, and on it goes. Memorized. And I say it to myself. That's what my worthy ideal is.
How often do you say it to yourself?
I've learned it so I don't have to, because it's so ingrained in me now. So success, the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And I urge everybody to think deeply about what their own worthy ideal is. And the joy of identifying it, pro tem, just for the moment, you go, that's what it is. You feel successful now rather than some mythical time in the future.
So it could be as simple as being like, the purpose of my life is to be kind to others, and then every
that's
day.
That's beautiful. That's it. My worthy ideal is to be kind to others.
That's not what mine is, but just
no.
And then so every day when I would like to be kind to others as well. But so every day, because I'm just thinking if someone's like, they don't have this belief in themselves, they don't really know, they're lost, they're looking at people achieving things and that's not them, but it doesn't have to be some like winning some big trophy. It could be getting better. My worthy ideal is to keep improving. That's all. And then so every day you do something, even for half an hour, that's reading something new or learning
playing a musical instrument. I'm getting better.
And then you say, okay, great, I'm moving towards my ideal and I feel good about myself.
I am progressively realizing my worthy ideal. I'm getting better. It's such a liberating idea, because no one can tell you what your life is about. You have to work that out for yourself. If we go to the Catholic teaching, or the basic Catholic teaching, your purpose in life is to get to God when you die. Well, that's that's a pretty boring type of life in one sense. You go, well, how am I going to get to God if I embrace that idea? I've got to be good. And then go, okay, how am I going to be good? And then there are many people who then say, well, I'll dedicate my life to being a member of the clergy. Mother Teresa, her worthy ideal was to make life better for the poor. And it takes work. This is where the personal development journey comes, because as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking of all of the steps that I would take with the people I've worked with, because this is heavy duty stuff. And then you say, well, what's the point of doing this? Because if you embrace this idea, all that you're going to have is you go on this journey and you're going to solve problems. And there's this juxtaposition. I don't want to have too big a vision for my life, because I don't want problems. And so this comes around to the attitude towards problems. And if you understand what I said earlier about problems, then you go, okay, so avoiding, if I live my life avoiding my problems, I will never become what I'm capable of becoming. And so then I'm not scared of problems. So the fear disappears. You think, why are people fearful? Because they're not going to be a success. But I say you are a success because you are on this journey of life, this gift that we have. And my life is about liberating people, freedom again, being at liberty to think big, and letting go of this idea that only if I achieve what I think big am I a success. No, the journey is what makes you a success.
And what about people who fear rejection of being their true self? So
that's beautiful. That's a great question. Great question. I've had to deal with rejection. I've had to deal with the fear of rejection. And I would suggest to you that there is only one way to get over the fear of rejection, and that is to be rejected. And to be rejected again and again. It's like the fear of public speaking. A lot of people don't like standing up in public. And it's practice. There's no alternative. And the fear of rejection reduces when you start to see, when you embrace this principle that everything is difficult before it's easy. You didn't know how to eat when you were born. You didn't know how to walk when you were born. You didn't know how to write when you went to prep. Well, maybe you did, but everything is difficult before it's easy. And being rejected particularly is difficult because deep in our psyche, in our subconscious minds that have been developed since every one of us was in utero, we learnt, and rejection is a good example, we learnt that as a child, as a baby, if we are rejected, we will die. And so for most of us, that's why we have to do the personal development. We have to understand that the fear of rejection is a reptilian brain response to death. Because we've all got a healthy fear of death. I don't want to die. Although there's the other argument, that the person who's truly able to live is the one who's not afraid of dying. I certainly agree to that proposition. But most people's fear of rejection relates to their being a baby and knowing that rejection equals death. No, that's a lie. And so one of the things to say to ourselves is, I love rejection. So that's where the mantra comes in. It's like your tennis serve, Delia. You can't get good at serving unless you do a lot of serving. You can't get good at rejection unless you reframe your mind to say, I love being rejected.
I guess it's knowing that you won't be fully, you will find your people. You will find, if you want to come out and follow a new path and express yourself, maybe some people won't like that and you'll be rejected by those people. But other people will accept you. Because if you're to be rejected by society completely, even as an adult, then you will die, because we need each other to survive.
That's correct. But do you know anyone who's been rejected entirely by society? I don't. And so that's a good example. Who is your tribe? Take Billy Connolly. I'm just reading Billy Connolly's autobiography. Wonderful, wonderful. I've been a Billy Connolly fan for decades. And, you know, there are those who love Billy Connolly and those who hate him. There are those who love particular singers and those who don't like them. There are those, imagine being the Prime Minister of Australia, you know, Anthony Albanese. Do you think there are people in Australia who hate Albanese? And imagine, you know, politicians, I think what I admire about politicians in many cases is if they're what I consider well-intentioned, is their willingness to face that rejection of the voter. And if you scrape in out of 100,000 voters, if you get 50,000 votes plus one, you might have 49,900 who hate you, and you're now representing all of them. And so I have not, you know, if you let go of this idea of needing to be loved by everybody, that also is very liberating. It's a great way to live. It's a great way to live life.
And I guess it's just accepting that it doesn't matter what you do, no, people won't like you. No matter, it's just impossible for everyone to love you.
That's correct. Doesn't matter what you do, someone won't like you. Mother Teresa, there are people who didn't like her.
Why wouldn't they?
Well, because then, you know, they hated anybody who had any religious intent, and she dedicated her whole life because it came from a deep listening to the word of God. Well, people who don't believe in God would then say she's a nutcase. So,
or I guess people even choose to not like someone just to be contrarian. If everyone loves someone, then that's part of their personality. So, okay.
So what other people think of us is none of our business. Now here's where I struggle, because as a professional speaker, as a business person, as a coach, I want people to embrace my idea. So, you know, there's this. I don't want to be contrarian about everything. And if more people like me, then they'll engage my services. And that's the trap we fall into. No, the world is a big place, and there's enough people. And you've got to stand for something. And if you stand for something, there'll be people who don't like you for that. Good. That's part of the learning journey.
And that's what you have at the end of your book. If you are passionate in your life, people will be jealous and will criticize you. Be passionate anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're driven and passionate about something and having a big vision, then your friends will often reject you because you are showing them up for being significantly less motivated than you are, and that you'll make them, for wrong reasons, what the feelings that you generate in other people, that's going to lead to their decision based on their unique upbringing. And again, that's one of the ways that we become loving and compassionate to everybody, is just to understand that each one of us has a whole different set of belief systems, whole set of values, whether they're conscious or unconscious. And that's the challenge of Christ's message that says love all. And in fact, that was on the entry to the something rock cap. Was it the Hard Rock Cafe? Its mantra was love all, serve all. And it's really easy to love people who agree with you. The great challenge in life is to love those who disagree with you.
Okay, I know you have to go. We've been talking for an hour.
Wow, there you are.
So, shall I ask you the last three questions?
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's anything else you want to add.
No, we've had a good coverage.
Okay.
A good coverage on the essence of life. Like we have dealt with. Someone who listens to this, dearly, I promise you, if they took on board what I said, their lives would change if they didn't know it previously.
which is
attitude to problems, understand your values, understand your beliefs, develop your strong identity, and get clear on what you want. If you do that, life becomes a beautiful game.
and reinforce it is probably the piece I'm missing because I was.
That's all. That's what I said before. Write out your strong identity, and you carry it around and you memorise it.
Okay, so what do you do to stay grounded other than reinforcing your identity?
What do I do to stay grounded? I spend a lot of time, morning and night, being grateful for what I have. Gratitude is an extraordinarily powerful practice that I put in place every day. Even when I'm driving my car and I get through a green light, I express my gratitude to God. Thanks, God. If I have to get somewhere quickly and it happens, thank you, God. And if I avoid a drama, I say thank you, God. And I wake up in the morning and I say thank you, God, for my life. Knowing that I didn't create this universe. I didn't create the planet. I didn't create my life. But my life is unfolding based on the choices that I make, but also hugely impacted by the circumstances that I attract to me. So gratitude is how I stay grounded.
What book I know we didn't get to talk about personal development, but I know you've been to Tony Robbins and learned from all these different teachers. Which one has had the biggest impact on you? I usually ask which book, but you can say a person.
Well, I'm an avid book reader, but I always listen to my intuitive answer to questions. And I recommend that to everybody. When you're asked a question, listen to what your spirit says, what your intuition says. My answer to that is Awareness by Anthony de Mello. It's in my book list, in my book. Anthony de Mello was an Indian, trained as a Jesuit priest, so he had Indian philosophy, Hindu Indian philosophy, but Catholic priest. That book, Awareness by Anthony de Mello, profound. And most importantly, because it's literally the transcript of a weekend workshop, and it is so liberating to understand that each person's awareness is their own unique journey. And so right now in my work, I'm constantly helping people raise their self-awareness, and self-awareness is a crucial element in our journey in being able to embrace this gift of life that we have.
And last question, what 3 words describe the best version of you?
Passionate, caring, and open to possibility, openness. I'm passionate, I care, and I'm open to what is going to happen.
Great. And how do people find you?
How?
How do people find you or find your
If they put in my name, Charles Kovess, on the internet, they'll get thousands of answers, and I'm easy to find. If someone wants to find me, they can find me. And lastly, my name Kovess in Hungarian means follow me.
Really?
Literally.
There you go.
And what does Burgess mean?
It means citizen of a town.
Well, I remember, that's right, a burger, wasn't it? Citizen of the town. Kovess means follow me. There you are.
Mine's much less interesting. Okay. Thanks.
Pleasure.